So this week I went so hard on my exercises, you guys, because last week I just was thinking about Professor Finkelstein. He's been on my mind a lot recently. I was thinking about how he looks that good at his age. It's impossible. How's that possible? So I went and did a little bit of sleuthing on him. I've spent most of this week actually in my spare time. Anything to stay away from the bad stuff on the internet. Manosphere content, anything to stay away from things that are just distracting and absolutely useless to our growth. So I went and read this really amazing and in-depth article about him. And apparently he used to run 5 miles. I don't know if he ran the full five miles, but he certainly did at least a run walk along this 5 mile section near his home. Nowadays, apparently he just strolls. But I thought that's how he's managed to stay looking that trim. But this actually happened last night, this other thing that happened. But because of that, I thought I need to just jack it up a little bit. So I started running again. And I'm telling you, as much as running is not my favorite sport, I'd rather dance. But as much as it's not my favorite sport, it has such an impact on my just happiness and positivity and also on my periods as well. So this is that tricky week where I should be really low and really down, but I've been able to manage it perfectly fine. So this is what I'm saying to you. Back in the day, I used to be a beast when it came to exercise, and I never suffered. I never had these issues. But because I've slowed things down, these difficulties have materialized. So I don't think it's just just a female thing. I think men as need exercise, of course, just as much as women. We will talk about Babygirl as well. I watched it last night. I had some time last night and I thought, this is crazy. I can't be waiting however many months to try and get this out on rent. There must be a dodgy way to see this. I'm sure I've picked up some malware along the way in trying to find this movie. I did end up finding it. And what do I think of it? I'm completely undecided about what I think of the movie. I think Harris Dickinson is amazing. He really is. And Nicole Kidman, as much as I've said she's really not my kind of actress or actor, and her look doesn't really appeal to me, I can see her beauty. And I don't know if that's because of the way she's acting, even though it's sometimes difficult to see emotions on her face for obvious reasons. But she's beautiful. She's a beautiful woman, and she's kept herself in such good shape. And I really think with Nicole Kidman, she wants a legitimate way, I think. She wants a legitimate way to show off her physicality and her sexuality, I guess, as well. Being, I think she's 58 or 59. Amazing. There's this one scene where they actually show her from the top up, and she's got abs, and she just looks, and her back muscles, she looks incredible. So there are no excuses. There are really no excuses. But that happened last night. But throughout the week, I was just thinking, yeah, why do we have to think that when you think of a 70-year-old, you just think that they're sort of not young. But whenever I see Professor Finkelstein, I'm not aware of his age at all. He's got this kind of timelessness. He's got this youthfulness about him. I'll come back to Babygirl. So I've been watching a lot of content related to Professor Finkelstein. And in my last video, I said that he never goes on the attack. This is true. He doesn't go on the attack, but he doesn't suffer fools gladly. Is that the expression? You know, you know me in expressions, guys. It's not a match made in heaven. Doesn't suffer fools. Doesn't suffer fools. Gladly, yeah. Finally, we're starting to remember expressions. So there was one video that I caught just briefly this morning, and he was being interviewed by an Indian gentleman from India, I'm assuming. And the guy got his credentials all wrong, his background and what he does completely wrong. And I'm sitting nodding away thinking, that sounds about right. And then the professor just said, well, apart from the fact that your introduction of me is completely wrong and I'm a blah, 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 but let's carry on anyway. Had I been interviewing him, oh my God, my heart would have sunk. But this Indian gentleman, he carried it off quite well. He styled it out, you guys. I would have apologized immediately and said, I don't know how that happened, or I need to be more diligent in my researching. But he did well. I thought he did well. And I'm just amazed at how we are in this period of time where we have access to people who have, to professors. We have access to people who can educate us online. And I'm someone who just has never had an interest in history. It's just not. I remember that it wasn't particularly my favorite subject at school either. But I think that's because we were studying the type of history that just didn't appeal to me. I wanted to know more about, I don't know, wanted to know more about the Native Americans and the Aborigines, and I wanted to know more perhaps about Africa and maybe the Middle East. And, you know, of course, we're in the UK, so you're going to learn about the UK history. But I think it would have been interesting and beneficial to switch it up a little bit and learn about world history rather than focusing on British and European history, perhaps. I don't even think that we really went into European history. Anyway, I dropped that subject as soon as I could, and I think this is what I mean, you guys, about the school and the education system. They really ruin it for us because they don't cater to what we. You think that you don't like a subject, but it's not that you don't like that subject. It's either that you've had a really bad teacher, or that they're not teaching the things that interest you in that subject. So I'm starting to find that I'm taking an avid interest in finding out about history, and I don't even know, if I'm completely honest with you, I don't even know if it's that I'm finding it interesting finding out about history. I think it's just that I'm enjoying listening to these amazing speakers. And I think the internet is just so incredible because these people, these professors, they would have been relegated to just their colleges or universities or schools. But now they have international platforms and they're becoming celebrities in their own way. And I think that's incredible. I think that's, I just think it's amazing. So I've really enjoyed watching him this week. I've really focused on just him. And just as a segue, I don't really have any comments on Mamdani. I don't know anything about him. He's very smiley and he's a fantastic speaker. Is he legit? I don't know. I heard that he's being funded by the Georgie guy, so I'm not really sure. And you know, he had a career as a rapper in the past, it seems. So he's one of these people who just wants to be, I think, famous for something potentially. Creatives and people who just are affable and like people, I think they tend to be like that. It doesn't really matter where they slot in themselves into. They just want to be renowned for something and perhaps be in the public eye. That's the kind of impression I get of him. I read this really great quote that said, young, it's fine that he's been, I don't really see the issue of him being voted in, but because, I don't know, I don't follow these things about him being a Democrat or a Marxist or a communist or a socialist and blah, blah, blah. Socialist? Wasn't Tony Benn a socialist? Mamdani doesn't give socialist vibes. Tony Benn was a really great speaker in the UK. He was a gentleman. I remember one time, I'm getting sidetracked, and this is how the videos end up being 50 minutes long. I need to focus more. Tony Benn was an old school, I think he was a socialist, if I'm not getting this wrong, MP, Member of Parliament in the UK. And he was such he was a very well-spoken gentleman, which made it all the more kind of interesting that he was a socialist. When you think of socialists, I think you think that they are people who perhaps don't come from money. But I think a lot of people who actually end up being socialists are people who have money and then they end up realizing that, well, humankind has to benefit everyone, otherwise all hell breaks loose. So I think Tony Benn was one of those people. And just thinking about socialism, I've been thinking about Kiefer Sutherland. I don't know why. I used to love his 24 series. If you've never seen it, you must go and watch it. Where he manages to beat up someone in every 24-hour. Guys, I don't know what's got into me. I think I'm so underslept. I'm just on a high. That happens after you've not been sleeping for quite a while. Ricky Gervais did this really great monologue at the Golden Globes where he was discussing Kiefer Sutherland's propensity for, sorry Kiefer, I really like you, potentially getting himself into violent altercations. And he referenced 24 in the joke to say the 24 series, Kiefer was always kind of beating someone up in 24. Amazing series. So I've been thinking about Kiefer, and then I just went to do a little bit of research on him. I can't even tell you how he came into my head and why, but I went to do a little bit of research on him, and he made this comment that said, I believe that everyone should have free education, free healthcare, and if that means I'm a socialist, then so be it. And I wholeheartedly believe in the same thing, and I'd like to add one more thing to that. Free healthcare, free education, free water. Why do we pay for water? The one gift that we've been given in society, and you're telling me by nature, and you're telling me we have to pay for it. So, socialists, I think, I'm not really sure, but socialists, I'm not sure what the difference between a socialist and a communist is, but I think socialists, you can correct me if I'm wrong, their interest or motivation is to make sure everyone's doing okay. So there was this one episode in Ali G back in the day, Ali G. Sacha Baron Cohen, the guy with the slightly erroneous politics, but we don't look at people's politics. It's all good, it's all love. He had done, back in the day, he was the original troller, by the way. He was the original troller in the UK. And then this guy, this Persian British guy called Kayvon, I think, he did a series called Phone Hacker. Okay, we're going off track. He'd done this back in the day when he was first starting out. No one knew who Ali G was. He had managed to get Tony Benn on his show, and he'd been saying, as Ali G used to, he'd call his woman his itchies, and Tony Benn was not happy with that at all. So he really took umbrage with that and he pulled Ali G up for this. And apparently afterwards, this is what I've learned anyway, apparently afterwards people used to just walk up to him on the streets and talk to him about socialism. And so Tony Benn ended up calling Ali Sacha Baron Cohen and thanking him and saying that because of that episode, his fame had kind of skyrocketed, or rather what he was trying to impart had become a talking point. So anyway, Mamdani doesn't really give socialist vibes, especially I think, doesn't he come from, but like I said, people who tend to come from wealthy backgrounds or who've come into money tend to end up seeing the world in a slightly different way. And then there are people who are new money and who become just absolutely insufferable, and they can't think, their whole world view is very much about hoarding. So, it just depends on the person. But that's not what we came here to talk about. I just was going to say that I don't really have any opinions of Mamdani just yet. I'm trying to be cautious about giving out opinions. He's obviously he's got a likable way about him. He's a fantastic speaker. I watched him very briefly on that debate against the other two guys. Oh, the quote that I read is that about Mamdani, which I thought was a really fair enough quote, is that the future is for young people, and I think a lot of young people supported him. So yeah, the future is for young people, and if they want someone young in power, someone who's fresh, energetic, and got charisma and spunk, then let's see where New York goes, and all power to the young people who are taking an active interest in this stuff. But I did watch a brief clip of him on this debate, and he wiped the floor with Cuomo, did he not? But I also found it really funny that Cuomo was purposefully getting his name wrong. It felt very purposeful. And I thought, Cuomo has been watching a little bit of Professor Finkelstein. Remember Professor Finkelstein and that debate with him against Destiny, where he kept saying, getting his name wrong, of course on purpose. Mr. Vermicelli, Mr. Bonelli, Mr. Bartocelli, Mr. Brunelli. It's one of the best things that I've ever seen from Norman Finkelstein, because he has a sharp tongue. This all comes back to the fact that he does have a sharp tongue, but he doesn't go on the attack unless he's being attacked or is warranted. And I respect that. I respect people like him who could go on the attack if they chose to, because he's sharp enough to be able to do that. But they minimize unfairness. I saw another interview of him actually. Also, I've been on a blitz, on a Professor Finkelstein blitz this week. I saw another interview of him where he was genuinely laughing and hearty. It's very rare to see. I think he's relaxed a lot more because he's been getting so much more support now. Whereas when he first came onto our screens in a major way was when he was on Piers Morgan initially, and the tide at that time was very different. The expression or the feeling around that region was very, very different. Whereas now people have been educated, so things have changed. So he's relaxed a little bit more. I think he's been getting a lot of support. I also read that there was a period when he'd become very, very well known in these recent years, where he was getting about 100 messages an hour. An hour, you guys, an hour? Insanity. And he said, I felt like crying because I didn't know how to, don't want to put words into his mouth. He didn't know how to respond or reply to all these kind messages. There was another interview where he was laughing, and the interviewer had a really nice and silly sense of humor, and he really kind of loosened Professor Finkelstein up. So it was nice to see. There was something I wanted to say. It's important, you guys. Oh, I lost my trail of thought. Something that he'd said. Something important. Oh no. It's completely gone, you guys. So yeah, Cuomo, he was trying it on with the surname, with Mamdani's surname. So yes, I'm being a little bit cautious about saying that I think this is a great thing for New York. Again, I never look at someone's politics per se, I just look at, can you not look at his politics when you're considering the fact that he's a mayor? I think that his heart's in the right place, but again, it's everything that we see. It's so difficult nowadays to trust anything that we see because so much is going on in the background that we're not aware of. It was just this whole George funded campaign that made me sort of think, what's this all about? There was something important about Professor Finkelstein, but I've forgotten. Never mind, it might come back to me. So that's been my week in a nutshell, and I don't know how we got to 22 minutes. So how am I going to talk about Babygirl, 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 Babygirl? So Harris Dickinson is amazing in this movie. His acting is sublime, and it's the first movie of Nicole Kidman's that I've seen. Actually, I've tended not to watch any of her films, but I'm going to go and watch Eyes Wide Shut just off the back of this film. She's very brave, not only because she's going sort of nude in this movie, but some of the scenes, I wouldn't say they're like graphic, but they are, she has to obviously express certain emotions, and that must leave an actor feeling quite vulnerable to have a whole crew watching that as it's happening. So this movie in a nutshell is about a woman, high-powered CEO, married to this guy, Antonio Banderas. He's very warm and gentle, and it's really weird because they're making love in this first initial scene that comes onto our screens. And I just thought, how did Antonio Banderas, was he in Don Juan DeMarco? Don Juan DeMarco, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Antonio, I think he was. How did he go from being such a hottie to, I mean, he's still an attractive man, but it wasn't Don Juan DeMarco, that was Johnny Depp. He was in something else where he played some kind of really hot character. But in this film, he was just more a gentle, loving husband type. Nothing wrong with that. But I think that's just the way the character was written. And just as you get older, you just become more tender, I think. I think you become more tender, you guys. So he was a loving and tender husband. How can I speak about this in a PG way? Let me do my best. So that's the first scene, and then it cuts to another scene where she goes off by herself to reach euphoria by herself. And she manages to do it by herself. So the first scenes are just a bit like, oh, what's going on here? Maybe it was just a bad day for them. It materializes that in 19 years, she's been reaching euphoria by herself. So this young intern, the very attractive and hot Harris Dickinson, comes into our company, and he is able to manage her, control her in such a way that she's able to open up physically. The depth wasn't there, the depth in the characters, but the destruction, I guess. Yes, we see the destruction of her being in this affair. I'm not explaining this very well. I think there are similarities to the film Unfaithful, and I've talked about the film Unfaithful in another video that I did. Incredible movie, but a very difficult watch, especially if you're younger. I think if you're an older person watching Unfaithful, you have more life wisdom and understanding to be able to cope with it. I watched that film when I was 21 years old, and I think I was abroad when I watched it at the time, and I found it one of the most difficult things to walk out of that cinema afterwards, because it made me think very, very clearly that I need to be super careful about this whole business of marriage, because even when you're utterly in love with your husband, the potential for an illicit affair, if you're not on your guard and if you're not careful, could occur. So you better make sure that your husband is everything so that you're not even tempted. It was that kind of feeling. Personally, so Unfaithful stars the beautiful Diane Lane, the beautiful, how can I forget his name? The gorgeous actor who was in Pretty Woman, and this other beautiful French actor who's absolutely stunning. That movie, there was a feeling of they've fallen in love, Diane Lane's character and this French guy, and it's so harrowing to watch because she's genuinely in love with her husband too. But it's a very tender film. There, it's excruciating. I don't really recommend watching it if you're a young person, but if you're older, but maybe you can watch it if you're a young person, because it will put you on your guard, as in you won't make stupid decisions about just willy-nilly getting into relationships that are of no benefit to you, or where deep love isn't present. So it had a profound effect on me. And I also mentioned in that video that I'd had an interaction probably the year prior, or maybe around that time as well, where I was privy to a conversation between a man who was considering getting divorced because he thought that his wife was having an affair on him. He wasn't sure, but he thought his wife was having an affair, and he wanted to know what his options. He wanted advice on what he should be thinking about. So I guess how to make sure he protects his wealth. He was a successful gentleman. That had a huge impact on me too. So I think these two things, because this man was very attractive and he had gravitas, and I remember thinking very clearly at that very young age, why would anyone want to cheat on him? But that's another video. I can't remember if I took it down or it's still up. If I can find it, I'll link it for you, because I go into that movie and that scenario in more detail. So it had nuances of Unfaithful, but it didn't, this movie, Babygirl, didn't have the depth of Unfaithful. And yeah, it's not a film that's going to have a film that's going to have an impact on me. Like, I'll still remember it years later. Whereas Unfaithful is a movie that I can still remember key moments. Obviously, this dance scene between Harrison Ford and Nicole Kidman is incredibly attractive. He's a beautiful, beautiful actor. And I had more to say about it, but it just didn't have the oomph. There are actually some tender moments between her and Harrison Dickinson. And there's even a tender moment between Harris Dickinson and Antonio Banderas, when Antonio Banderas is having a kind of panic attack. You think he's about to have a heart attack, potentially. and Harris Dickinson calms him down. There's one moment in the scene where Harris Dickinson says, or she, Nicole Kidman, recognizes that he's able to understand people and what people's needs and desires are. And his character is written definitely in that way. And he says, sometimes I scare myself because when you have that kind of quality and awareness of people, it's very easy to manipulate them, I think, or control them. So I'm trying to stay away from using these labels like psychopath, sociopath, but there are certain elements of psychopathicness or qualities to him in this film. Machiavellian, potentially, if we stay away from those labels. One thing I didn't like was that throughout, I'd really liked his character up until the point where he said she was starting to pull back from their romance, their affair, and he said, well, I'm gonna basically tear your world apart. So he was in a way blackmailing her, but for some reason she seemed to find that it sort of fueled her desire for him. I think, again, because it comes back to a control element. But that sort of turned me off the character, not Harris Dickinson, but the character. It sort of sullied the character for me a little bit. They look amazing together, actually, throughout the film. There was one scene where he sort of started to date someone his own age in the company, and it just felt all wrong somehow. So I think there is something very exciting and passionate about age gap relationships. And, she's 58, but she looks 10 years younger than her age. And I was thinking, well, why are older men having all the fun with a younger woman? It didn't look weird or strange to me at all. And I thought, yeah, all power to older women dating younger men. So yeah, lack the depth, and they focus too much on external stuff in this movie, like the company that she's working at and outside characters. I think if they'd focused more on these three people, her husband and her and Harris Dickinson, I think it would have been a much better movie. And I think it could have been written in such a way that we understood Harris Dickinson better as well, and how he came to be so profoundly capable of bringing out these qualities in an older woman who is in a position of power. There are very few people who have that kind of capability. And yes, it's a film, but there are people like him out there who are able to just read you so well and know how to manage you. I don't want to say manipulate, manage. So it's worth a watch. It's not going to leave you tarnished or frustrated or angry, or it's not going to leave you with any kind of extreme emotion or feeling. I think the only thing that I didn't like, I guess, was this aspect of him manipulating her to carry on with the relationship. Otherwise, he would have just kind of blown her whole world apart. And there was another aspect that I didn't particularly like as well, was when she came clean. Kudos to her that it wasn't someone else. He didn't find out on his own. But she'd been put in a position now where that affair had been discovered by a junior worker of hers, and she sort of had no choice but to tell her husband. So she told him that in a roundabout way that she'd had this affair, but she said it was only the once, and it's someone that you don't know. Massive lie. It had been going on for a while, and Harris Dickinson, had casually dropped by their house on a couple of occasions So he was known to the husband. And so I think I didn't like that was her opportunity to just tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And she didn't. So yeah, when you get older, when you become older, you recognize that I think you can be deeply in love with one person. I haven't been in that situation where I've been deeply in love with someone and then found other people interesting, but I don't know if that's because, or appealing, I don't know if that's because it wasn't a 20-year, she's been with this guy, I don't know, for 19 years. I don't know if in 19 years you just become really comfortable with each other and it just becomes a little bit dull and boring. But come on, ladies, 19 years and you haven't expressed to your husband that you're not able to reach euphoria with him. I mean, communication is so important. What else did I want to say? Yeah, you get older and you see these movies in a more nuanced way. Whereas I think when you're younger, I was just so horrified. I was horrified when I was younger because I think I'd expected to have a very, very, I have to mention something else about Harris Dickinson. Stalkery, okay. When you're younger, I think when I was younger, I had a very idealistic way of looking at the world. And I think my expectation had before, if you told me what the film was about before I went to see Unfaithful, I think I would have said to you, well, I think it's completely wrong and she's completely in the wrong, blah, blah, blah. But then you go and see that film and it just troubles you because you think you can't help human emotion and what you feel. You just can't help it. What you can help is destruction. And I think when you have those kind of feelings and they become so uncontrollable that you cannot see yourself not wanting to act on them, then you have to be honest with the other party. And if the other party truly loves you, if they truly and deeply love you, I think they would let you go. I would let the person go. I would just want them to be honest with me. Because we have this one life and being happy and being true to yourself and true to the people around you as well is really, really important. So I would want to know, and I would, as difficult as it would be if you're deeply in love with that person, I think the right thing would be to let them go. So yeah, Harris Dickinson. There were moments when he was being stalkery in this film, which had he not been an attractive and beautiful young man, or just a beautiful and attractive person, he would have just been so turned off by these stalkery aspects, the way he would just kind of waltz into a family home. But it just wasn't something, as much as I was aware of it, he was able to get away with it because he's just beautiful and charismatic and all this good stuff. So yeah, you can get away with a lot based on, I think, beauty and behavior.